a different way. I'll just click
Yeah, the join me link will do it. You just can't edit. So.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay.
I'll just write down.
So I'm sharing the just the stuff you agree with. That's the contract.
Right. Yeah, everything that actually penetrates my consciousness. There's this built-in filter. For some reason, I only remember Eileen saying things I agreed with. Sorry,
Rob, I'm sorry, this is Mark Radcliffe. I'm trying to join the meeting, but we don't have Flash for security reasons. Is there any way to join me without Flash?
I don't. There is. You have to download the desktop, which is probably even it's more restricted. But you can just follow along on the Etherpad because fundamentally that's all what we're gonna do. Oh.
Mark, I think the NSA has rooted your laptop as well as the BIOS in your network device. I don't think Flash is really a big issue at this point.
The question is, why was it routed to your computer, though? That's what I want to know.
Well, hey, Math Rock and I have a little agreement. Everyone say hi to Nathan.
Hi, this is Nisa Stratman. I'm also on the line.
Hi, Nisa. Who was the other IBM person who was on earlier?
This is Catherine Diep from IBM.
Kath.
Yep.
Thanks.
Oh, I should start with a 0. Okay. Cool. Just as is anybody else on the phone before we dive into topics and agenda? I see Randy somewhere. Randy's on the join me. So I'm going to put him in here. All right.
I just see viewer 4, 2, 6, and 7. How do you see Randy?
I don't know, but it's definitely.
Oh yeah, there it is. Randy Bias. No, you're right.
I make that window big so I can watch people come in because it's.
Yep.
Cool. I'm hoping we can stay pretty tight on the agenda. I think there's some specific action items that I'm hoping we come out with around what actually moving forward on some of these big ticket work items that we need to start chomping on. And so I've already started a template for Elephants.4, so we can start an agenda for that as we have parking lot. Okay. And the first thing I would note is I sent these summaries out to a broader audience, and then I posted a DefCore summary. And Alan and Joshua had both had a chance to look at that before I posted it. And I'm planning to take those and then to submit to the community. But I was hoping if you haven't read the summary post I did, let me throw a link to it. Let's see. So I did two. One is I took the topic for today, which is what the test criteria are, and I posted those. And then I wrote a summary of what our as a committee, what our progress has been to date, and the link for that is here. If you have any concerns, it's already public information. All our notes are, but before I send it to the OpenStack list, and then I'm working with Lauren to make a sort of a white paper post that Joshua and I are going to co-edit and author. Talking about DefCore and our status. This is the place to sort of get those items and bring them up. And if you're interested in helping write this content and edit this content, ping us. I'm hoping not to have a huge audience doing it, but we could use editorial help. So the target on that is 128. So that means we should have a draft by 120 to go out to the community and give them an update on where things are going. The response that I saw from the summary of DefCore and everybody, we've accomplished a huge amount, in my opinion, so far. We've been really active, having a lot of meetings. Has been very positive. People like seeing the board being responsive on this. So. Okay.
You know, it might, and we've talked about this earlier. We took our early drafts and we ran them past our largest detractors. I think it might be worth doing that again with this status update, and particularly the finalized draft criteria. So I'm happy to take that action again for the folks I ran it past last time: George Reese, Andrew Schaefer. There was a Gartner analyst. Oh, Alessandro Pirelli. If anyone has good ideas on other detractors that we can track down feedback from, that seems like it's better to invite it early than suffer it later.
Okay.
Cool.
Other ad hoc items before we dig into the agenda? Cool. Okay. And the first item we had, Catherine, I think was a follow up from that you guys had brought into Elephants.3.
Yep.
Okay. Are you prepared to talk about that for a little while and do?
We can talk really quickly and just give a state of what we learned so far in terms of the test case. So and we're trying to do that like very shortly. So if we look at the Tempest test, it actually has the 4 major categories. The first one is API test. The second is scenario test. Third, command line, like client test and stress test. We have not yet to understand fully what stress test is, and we'll do that next time. So then in API test is mostly the API using the token and etc. We further dissect it out. And because there's a question earlier to say, ask for the percentage of API coverage. So before we dive into the percentage of API coverage, we try to look at, for the API test, what are the components that are being tested. So that is what this table is. So as you can see, most of the API tests concentrate on compute and also object storage. So so total number of tests in here, we categorize that also in gate test and smoke test. In generally, the smoke test will run about 10 minutes. The complete gate test is about 45 to 1 hour. And total number of tests in API test is 1,200, the number there. And there's 2 interfaces, the JSON interface and XML interface. So those are the API tests. And the next tab, we give the detail, and we're going to dive into and trying to look at the percentage of API being coverage for each of the tests. But from my point of view, it's more the API test could be coverage, but as we know, we have a lot of configuration option. And that will be very hard to really know what configuration are important to cover, and that's what we're going to do next time. Then we dive quickly into scenario test. So before we move on, is there any questions?
Well, so I'm several years out of date here, but I do remember when we first set up CI for OpenStack, we were generating Kotubara coverage metrics for the code base and a measurement of how much of the code base was actually being executed through unit tests. Is anyone sort of looking at those numbers? Is that still relevant, or is it really not relevant because of the number of options that we're not covering?
Personally, I have not looked at. We could do that next, but we have not.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And then the scenario test and the CLI test, those are tests using the official OpenStack client, the clients. So it's Nova client, a Keystone client, etc. The test is very different from the API test, which is use the service endpoint and token, etc. So the purpose of scenario test is go across different components, but you do see in a few test scenario in there from test case number 7 to test case number 11 is usually only test on one component. But nevertheless, we total there are about 14 test cases in scenario test, and in detail you can see the scenario that what are being tested. The important thing here is these tests use the official client interface, so it's not like the API test. And then the CLI test itself, again, is kind of just like the scenario test, but just run on one component. There's some overlap between the CLI, the client test, and the scenario test. So that's what we have summarized for you today.
Okay, thanks.
This is great.
Yeah. What
do you have a spreadsheet with the raw tests in it? It just has the whole list.
So if you look at API, go to API detail.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all for Havana, starting from Havana, all the test case will start with test. So these are the method or function that do the test. And mostly, I think, these are the tests.
Okay. And then the scenario details are the other.
Yeah, scenario detail you look at, because if, for example, you look at row number 5, that is what they call minimum test. But what you see there is it use Gland to create a image or upload an image, and then set up some key, and those are the scenario. Yeah.
Thank you. This is okay. Excellent.
Yeah, and I did not do the detail on 7 to 10 because it's just one component. It's just a detail of the test itself. It doesn't go across the components. So it's not a test case to call up to. Yeah. So I feel like these items maybe should belong to the CLI, but it doesn't matter at this time. So next time we look at stress test, and more important here is if for interop, we concentrate on both the API test and also the official client test, or do we choose one of? Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting question. Rob, I wouldn't mind stealing a couple of minutes to sort of debate that particular topic.
I was actually hoping we would take some time on next steps, because there's some specific things that we want to do from here.
Yeah.
Which I think that's the same. So I guess we're going to need to get to maybe we should wait until we talk about the criteria, because that really is where I would run with next steps, is taking this work and then figuring out how we're going to start doing the criteria score as a pass. And I have some thoughts around how this is going to intersect with criteria, but I'll hold those for criteria maybe, and not do next steps until then, if that's all right. Do you want to make your point?
Well, no, I think the question on the table is, do we consider the CLI tools, the quote unquote official libraries, as part of what we should be testing, or should we really be testing the APIs themselves via whatever mechanism the tests are written to use. I guess this comes back to one of the early discussions about DefCore back when it was RefStack before the board approval. The Compatible One folks, Jean-Pierre reached out to say, hey, do you want to include Compatible One as part of the test suite? And it doesn't use the official libraries, it uses alternative clients. And the same argument could be used for the Bosch CPI as part of Cloud Foundry, which uses Fog as a set of client libraries, or Termi's new Oculus unified client. I tend to be on the side of saying, hey, more clients is better if we believe interop should be at the API layer and not at the client library.
Can I give you a complete opt-out answer?
Yes.
Which is, let's take the tests we've got, put the criteria on them, and see what happens.
Okay.
Because that, and then if we bring in other. There's nothing in the principles that limit us to the exact suite and Tempest, so it would be reasonable for people to bring other tests and see how they measure against the criteria. Actually, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion is to not answer it and score them, see if it's material and if it's a problem or not.
Okay. I'm open with that. So, having said that, do you want to go back to the other topic of next steps?
No, I think that we're going to get tangled in the criteria discussion if we talk about next steps, because to me, unless there's something, what I'm seeing is that we've got a body of tests, we have some scoring, we now have a spreadsheet that has all the tests in it. The next thing that I think to do is to start, create a master list that has the criteria in it, and then start trying to score it against the criteria that we've got. And we need to discuss the process.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my concern is to start applying criteria without the sample output of the RefStack of running those tests against a bunch of different cloud environments is what worries me. I think we'll get. I agree. We have to do that because we don't have the data yet. But I would be more comfortable if we had the data before we started talking about the criteria as it's applied.
I'm not expecting us to score all 1,200 something tests. What I'm hoping for next steps is between now and the next meeting. Now I'm jumping to next steps anyway. Is that we will do it? We'll figure out here a sample set that we think is worth scoring. That is going to give us enough data to know if the criteria are right, and then.
Gotcha. As a test of criteria. Okay.
We have to test the criteria. And I don't want to do that against 1,000. I want to do it against.
You made a meta joke.
Yeah. Oh,
sorry.
Don't go anywhere. No, meta recursion limit enforced.
Yes. Okay.
So. But if there's more, I think this is really helpful. It gives us a sense there's even more tests, and the coverage is actually, I think, good.
I also think it would be worth deriving. I mean, there are some obvious and easy conclusions that we can draw from, especially the API tests spreadsheet, which is Glance has zero coverage of XML. Neutron has almost zero coverage of anything in the gate. It has one test. Object storage has zero coverage of XML, or there is volume and compute both have almost equal coverage of XML and JSON. So it may be that there's an easy conclusion that says if we care about XML for interop, maybe we should encourage people to write some test coverage on the XML side. That would be what George Reese would say if we showed him this slide.
Right. And actually, this is a good discussion point. So looking at this data, we could actually make a statement that XML, we could limit this pass to not XML because the coverage is unequal.
Yeah, I mean it's actually pretty easy for us to say, we cannot call XML part of our interrupt story because we don't have the test to prove that it works.
Right.
Or if we do, yeah.
So one of the things that is really useful to do is to try and leave here with some limiting decisions, right? So could we, as a blanket thing, say we're going to eliminate the XML tests for this cycle, just out of the gate from this analysis?
Let me think about that. I don't know that we can. The only place where I see the lack of XML coverage being really problematic is on image. Because if you look at compute identity and volume, they all have reasonably equal coverage, and they go well together. Right, because we may end up actually saying, well, network and object storage have such little test coverage that we can't even consider them properly, or we're going to include some other test suites in order to consider them properly.
Let me switch this to observations.
Yeah.
Some project, it's really programs.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, the other thought I had, this is Troy, just looking through the API details section, I'm wondering if it would make sense to just take a pass at capabilities based on the test list, so that maybe instead of, and I don't remember for sure, but I thought we had kind of talked about potentially scoring capabilities and then realizing there may be multiple tests along with a capability. That thought is fairly well echoed in the list of tests that's in there, and while it might not be 100% accurate, maybe I ought to just take a quick pass at sort of, as opposed to having the, however many hundreds of tests, getting down to some smaller number of capabilities where we've, got a dozen tests per, for security groups, for instance. If we wanted to at least take a pass at looking at whether that makes sense as opposed to the detailed list of individual tests.
Right.
I think that does make a lot of sense. I mean, one of the goals we had in kicking off this whole discussion of coverage was to loop in the docs folks, because it may be that logically the way the capabilities are described in the docs is the right way for us to roll them up. Or it may be that there's something about the semantics of the underlying API that make it easier to identify what the capability is. If that makes sense.
You're getting a little choppy, by the way.
Oh, sorry. That seems odd because I'm on a real line, but
it might be me. I'm on a real line too, but okay. So, can you restate your question, because some of it chopped out for me?
Oh, I was just seconding Troy Toman's point, which is that yes, rolling these up to capabilities and then scoring the capabilities with criteria is probably the better approach. And maybe we can learn from the docs, or sort of, intersect the docs with this list of tests as a way of identifying what the underlying capabilities are. AKA security groups is a capability, and there may be a dozen tests in here that relate to that.
I definitely think part of the items here are going to be to define the capability subset. Yes. So, but looking at this, would you apply that? We're not going to know how many different capabilities there are until we actually do some sub-screening on this, I think. Right.
Like I said, yeah, what I was thinking is it may be just as a quick and dirty first pass, it wouldn't be that hard to just take, because a lot of these tests have common names that looks like they tie to at least some level of capability. We may want to group those at a higher level, but I'd be willing to take the spreadsheet initially and just, try to do a first pass filter and see what that leaves us in terms of what number of capabilities look like they're represented based on the test names that we have in the current suite. And then it may make sense to take that list and compare it to the API docs and just see if there's any obvious missing pieces. But I may go ahead and do some work on that over the next week or so anyway. even if we don't have that as a formal action item, it may be useful just to look at that.
I already made it a formal action item, Troy. You're done.
Oh, okay. Then there it is. I guess you got me to sign up for something.
So we will not do that.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yay. I think that's a great idea. Eileen, what?
No comment.
You were going to. I thought somebody else was. I thought that was you. Somebody else was volunteering for something.
No. This is Catherine. We were about to do the next mapping is to API, but I think Troy will have a better insight in terms of capability. Yeah.
So you were going to do
looking more into the stress test itself.
So you were going to do another level,
Right. But I think we might not have the insight that Troy would have. So, yeah.
Well, I'll give it a shot with this list and the docs, and then we'll see what refinements we can make from there.
Right.
That'd be good. And so we're going to keep working in the spreadsheet, so that's part of action decision.
That makes sense. I'll add a column for capability or something that we can use to take a look at.
Troy, if you add your email address to the Etherpad, I'll add you with edit permissions to the spreadsheet. I didn't make it global world editable just because it's harder to track history of changes on a Google Doc than it is on an Etherpad.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll add it on there.
Thanks.
All right, enough covered. We're at 20 minutes on this topic. Close it and move on.
Yeah, we've got action items. Troy will lead the charge.
I'm actually a little reluctant on item number 2.
Oh, do you want to just summarize what the proposed next actions were, and then where we got hung up, except for just that none of us have enough time over the holidays to do anything?
Yeah, that, and I want to make sure we have consensus that this is a thing that we want to push, because I based on what, and Eileen could go over this from the legal committee subcommittee meeting. This isn't going to be a oh yeah, that makes sense, let's go topic.
You think we're going to die on this hill?
I don't think we're going to die on this hill, but I don't think it's worth taking it if the board doesn't agree. We don't have a consensus on the board, or even out of this committee. And I want to make sure we do if we're going to take it on.
I'm personally really motivated to take it on, but I am keenly aware that it might be appropriate to divorce that from DefCore. I think it really, really helps with the definition of programs and projects in OpenStack and the intersection of the mark with the use of the community mark versus commercial mark. But it does feel like the rest of DefCore can be very fact-based. We have criteria, we have scoring, we have lists of tests where we have collected input from the they see are important. And the program versus project, or the change proposed there is more of a rational point of view as opposed to an obvious logical conclusion.
Except that I think it has a specific concrete legal component that I actually think it's important. But
I totally agree it's important. I just think that we will end up having to defend it, whereas the rest of what we've done defends itself.
And I apologize, I missed the last DefCore meeting, so I may be doing a little bit of catch-up here. But I know on the legal meeting we had, there was a robust discussion on this point, and I think net towards the end, we were sort of looking toward DefCore to help give us the answer, if you will, so that then we could then figure out the legal implications. Because you're right, there's absolutely legal implications here.
Right.
When we discussed it in Elephants.3, everybody seemed to be very pragmatic that this was a rational approach, but it definitely is. It's not one that everybody's going to rally around and say, "Oh, of course."
Right.
And I guess
what I think we should do?
No.
Is Jonathan? Jonathan, are you active on the call? I know you're lurking, but are you dialed in?
Yep, I'm here. I'm also doing the TC meeting. They were talking about some stuff. So.
Oh, simultaneously. Nice.
Yeah. That's good.
Which actually is maybe an interesting point too for the if we are going to get into some of these topics that overlap with the TC, might be good to schedule one of these.
What would be what would be really easy to do and might be useful is just have Stefano Mafuli or someone else on the community team run a Google Calendar, a public Google Calendar of all the OpenStack meetings.
There actually is one.
Is there?
Well, not a Google Calendar. There's an Etherpad on it.
No, there's a Google Calendar of it.
Oh, there is? I haven't seen that.
Yep.
Is the DefCore meeting on that?
The DefCore meeting is not on there.
Ah, then that is our fault.
Yes, it is. I can easily resolve that if I know the link to it or how to.
Global Events Calendar. Google Calendar. Well, there's a marketing global calendar.
Yeah, that's a different one.
Let's take this
off. For lack of a better place to put it, I'm just going to throw it at the top of.
You're right.
Okay, created a parking lot and ad hoc items.
Where's that?
So, Jonathan, the reason I brought this up is I think really the deciding vote or the endorsement that the change to programs versus projects needs to have will probably come from you and Mark, saying we have this message about OpenStack as being the platform of the future of the data center, and the intersection of these three circles, and the best way to express that mission and that definition of OpenStack is to organize the OpenStack projects and programs according to this more logical arrangement. And we're going to do the right things by the changes to the bylaws and the trademark policy to make that work, and to eliminate confusion and to lower the amount of noise around new programs and new projects, etc. But I don't think, in other words, if it's just the board or it's just the DefCore committee, that we're going to be able to move that forward.
Yeah, I think the there are like a lot of different uses and kind of overlapping areas that come into play with this, which I think is what makes it not just a even an easy thing to explain, but even less easy to kind of get everyone on the same page. But I think that from the perspective of how we talk about OpenStack and how we market it and describe it, we really have moved away from projects or programs or anything that's kind of at a component level, and we really are trying to talk about capabilities, and in general we talk about the three buckets of compute, storage, and networking, and we're actually working on some updates to kind of bring that along even farther and abstracting away those individual components, because it's just confusing at that level. So I think from sort of the messaging and marketing perspective, it makes a lot of sense. I think the area that becomes tough is these things are actually part of OpenStack. They are really, in terms of software, they are OpenStack, and they go through an official process and get approval and are developed under an official process, and so it's kind of hard to from in the non-commercial descriptive sense, even it's just hard to figure out exactly how do we talk about all the from on the development side and in the community at large these things without admitting that they're OpenStack. I think that's one of the tough things to line up there. But what were you going to say, Eileen?
Yeah, so because I guess I'm a little bit confused too. Like even before we get to the technology piece, because you're right, that's a big piece from the marketing messaging side. So how are you talking about OpenStack where you've moved away from the project program? Because I mean, oftentimes I get kind of hung up on that even as well. Even when I'm trying to talk about it externally to someone, I'll get sort of wrapped up in the project program piece of it. How do you kind of eliminate some of that confusion? How are you using it?
If you spent like 2 days at events with me, you would hear me say compute, storage, and networking probably 6,000 to 7,000 times.
Okay.
Maybe an exaggeration,
okay.
But that's really how
okay.
we talk about what OpenStack does.
Okay.
It's software for building clouds to manage compute, storage, and networking. And it does that with it manages virtualization. It manages then we get into some of the details, but we really don't. And in a lot of areas, even if you look at like our slide decks and stuff, we've taken the term project out of there completely. And in most cases, what we talk about is a capability. And so we'll talk about the object storage capability, and we'll say this is what you use it for. And we talk about the block storage capability, and this is what you use it for. Those match up to one-to-one to programs which have single projects in them. But then we'll also talk about things like shared services, like a service registry, an identity service, an image service. And we have these, so we kind of roll it up at a capability level. And again, this is because, especially as the number of projects and programs and everything have proliferated, it's very clear that is a confusing message to people who are just looking for something that's kind of put in the more familiar product marketing terms that they're used to out in their everyday jobs.
Right. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Jonathan.
Jonathan, do you have a preference on how we proceed with this? Because I think there is a bylaws and a message, and a trademark implication for this, and the board has an outstanding request to make OpenStack telemetry a core project and add it to the list. But I feel like the board needs an answer to that request. We haven't given them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that some of the bylaws changes that we talked about in the legal call, where we kind of want to remove the list of projects from the bylaws and kind of be less specific at that level, I think are actually good approaches to take. Because I also think that I think we've made progress in this, but I think that the one thing that I feel certain about is, it looks very different 2 years on right now than it did 2 years ago, and it'll probably continue to look fairly different. So I think that from the bylaws perspective, what I think I would like to see as an approach is really to sort of put less specificity directly in the bylaws, because it's kind of the hardest thing to update. And I mean, I think we can talk about exactly what that means, because I don't have the full answer on that. But I think moving away from basically there being just an approved list of core projects is a good step. I think that thinking about one of the things that we talked about in that meeting as well was sort of using OpenStack paired with a project name in a standalone sense versus in kind of a release sense. And I think that's something that it would make sense to clarify, because I don't think that if somebody is off using only OpenStack telemetry or something like that, that they should give the impression that they're kind of running what would commonly be thought of as OpenStack. So I think like some of those things are areas where there can be a lot of clarification. And then I think just some of the wording in the bylaws right now is potentially confusing. I think those things are all good things to clarify and make and kind of provide us flexibility so that the board and the technical committee can iterate on this as the landscape keeps changing.
Well, we definitely need some clarification language here. And I mean, one of the things to me is the whole concept that a project as a program is another piece for all this stuff, right? And the confusion over that. So if just creating clarification is a sufficient thing to do, then at least I think we at least need to take those steps. I think we do need a discussion with the TC and the board or the DefCore, interested parties in both those groups to at least have a discussion and have a position.
Yeah, I think it's clarification and then also sort of removing some of the strict, sort of giving a little bit more flexibility around how these decisions are made.
Yeah. This is Mark Radcliffe. I mean, I agree with that. I think the most important thing is the flexibility. I mean, I think that what we've discovered is that this is very much an evolving project, and frankly, one of the most exciting open source projects I've been involved in. But at the same time, I think we also have discovered that our crystal ball is kind of cloudy, and unfortunately, we really, we sort of put ourselves in a very specific approach, which, already is, we've kind of gone outside of that. And I think things, 5 years from now, who knows where we will be. But I think it's fair to say we won't be where that, where that part of the bylaws puts us.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense, both what you and Jonathan are saying, Mark. I think we do need to have more flexibility so we can go forward. And like you said, too, I mean, the thing is, as we guys were pointing out earlier, look, the project's almost 2 years in from at least we moved over to the foundation, and we've already seen significant changes since then. So if we can just allow ourselves more flexibility in the future, I think that will be really helpful.
Well, all right, but you guys are running back to where with the legal committee.
I know. I'm sorry.
I think no. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, enthusiastic, total 100% yes. I think we do need to do this, and I think we want the flexibility, and I like that. What I don't want to do is just derail another legal committee meeting because people get their head explodes when we say when we say, all right, Ceilometer, you can't say Ceilometer is OpenStack telemetry. You have to say OpenStack telemetry project Ceilometer. And if that's the right thing to say, then we just need to agree that that's what we're going to do, and then disseminate that message. Right. And
I will say I don't want to, I think as a matter of context, I'm dealing with another open source organization I can't talk about because it isn't public yet, but who is wrestling with these types of issues and the use of certain words to describe programs or projects, et cetera. This is not a situation that's limited to OpenStack. I think as trademarks people become more sensitive to the value of trademarks, I think you're going to see this as an issue for more of these foundations.
Right. So I guess the point I'm making is that that specific program project thing is interfering with us discussing real issues. Just like how we had to go through with Spider and figure out a core issue and get past it. My sense on it.
Which things is it blocking? Because if there's a specific thing that we want to overcome, then that might actually give more focus to the discussion versus, I think right now we look at it and we know that there are things that we should try to fix. But maybe if you can lay out like the specific thing that's getting blocked, then it'll give us kind of a straight line path to attack first.
I think that's the key question. Thank you for asking it. I feel like it is blocking us moving from a project-based definition for core to a test capability-based definition of core. And so I feel like as long as people are trying to make projects like Salometer or whatever comes up, Salometer's just the one that hit first, into a core project, and they're worried about that, I feel like it's a distraction from the real conversation of, hey guys, no, we're moving to a capability-driven core discussion. And so that's the knot that I'm trying to untie with this.
Yeah. Well, I think that like with the Salometer telemetry thing, you know, the what the project team is trying to solve for is to be able to actually to call their the work that they're doing that's being included in the OpenStack release OpenStack, and I think that the way the bylaws are worded right now, you can interpret that as saying that they have to be a core project per the bylaws, and I think that moving, like changing that language to something that is I think that Mark Radcliffe, you had even thrown out a sort of like a line on that legal call, something like, the core OpenStack project is the or set of capabilities for which, test paths that are approved by the board and the technical committee or something like that. I mean, just something that simplifies that and puts a clear line that gets crossed in the bylaws, and it doesn't have to say exactly how that line is maintained on an ongoing basis. It's just the responsibility of the board and the technical committee. I think like that would be, to me, that's the kind of like the bylaws step that then over time we can adjust that, we can add things to it, we can rework it, but it's within it's actually in the power of the board and the technical committee instead of being something that requires bylaws changes all the time.
Right, but can we make that change without a bylaws change? This is the trick. I don't mind doing that, but we had said we were going to not try and make bylaws changes. So if your suggestion can be done with a board vote, then I'm all in favor. If it requires a bylaws change,
let's determine. I'm sorry. This is Mark. I think we ought to determine what we want to do in more detail. Then we'll decide whether we're going to do a bylaw change or not. And we may decide we want to do something less if it requires a bylaw change. But I think intertwining the discussions at this point is not productive. I think let's define what we want. Let's define what the best case is for what we want to do. And then if we decide that we don't want to we decide it needs a bylaw change, and we decide we don't want to do it, then we can slim it down. But I think we need to make the case for what's right technologically, and then decide how to implement it legally.
Guys, I'm gonna offer a little bit of yelling as a service here, because this has been going on for 3 years and it's making me so bloody angry. I can't even express it. The word OpenStack is absolutely losing value. It is becoming synonymous with crap experimental science software that doesn't work. And the number one reason for that is almost anything can go out and call itself OpenStack. So we have things like Neutron, which after 2 years doesn't even have basic feature parity with Nova Network. The code is an unworkable mess. It was just had a major refactor between one version and another, such that we can't even backport fixes now. And yet it's known as OpenStack networking, to the exclusion of Nova Network, which is 70% of the deployed code base. So the reason that we had this discussion in the first place, the reason we put it in the bylaws, is because if we can't limit the things that can call themselves OpenStack, the term OpenStack ends up having no value at all. And that is the situation we're ending up with. So DefCore is lovely as a theoretical exercise to say, hey, it would be nice if things that were called OpenStack worked with each other. But if we can't also limit that things outside of DefCore shouldn't be called OpenStack unless basically they work, we're in a very poor position. So the proposal here is to say, can we dilute the number of can we limit the number of things and go around saying, hey, we're OpenStack X, and pick a new term, we're OpenStack telemetry, whatever the hell telemetry means, so that the word OpenStack is not getting stamped on things that nobody uses and they basically don't function. I think the motivation to do this is pretty clear.
If we want to limit what actually gets released as OpenStack, then the process for that is on the TC side. And
the last time something was banned from taking on the term OpenStack was when I was still on the project policy board, and it was the inclusion of scalar only because it was written in PHP. Like, there is a process. It has rejected 0 things. It is an open gate. The reason the bylaws split that responsibility between the TC and the board was because the understanding was the TC, even then, did not see themselves as having the authority to control what could use the term, but only the authority to control whether or not they were following the approved process. And that was the whole discussion that went into the integrated release definition as well. The only thing the TC is agreeing to is that, yes, they are following the process, they use StackForge, they have code reviews, they've built a community, and they're integrated with our mailing list and our sense of self. But the definition of should it logically be part of infrastructure as a service, or does the code actually serve any of the common needs of the folks who are consuming the rest of OpenStack? They punted. That has been punted to the board, and we've done nothing with it. The ball's sitting on the ground.
And so do you think that the switch to using program language makes that situation better or worse?
I think it makes it massively better, because I think if we come back to what Jonathan was saying earlier is what he stands up and says every day is OpenStack is storage, compute, and networking. OpenStack is storage, compute, and networking. Those are the top 3 OpenStack programs. And if things don't fit into those buckets, then the debate of creating a new program should be something that happens at the board level.
I strongly agree with you, and this is why we've kept it on the agenda for this committee. Because if we don't have some control of OpenStack and what it means, then when we actually surface out of DefCore a set of tests and capabilities to define core, we're going to find we've diluted the core statement. And so I guess I'm not ready to drop this. Just like John.
But I think just to add to that point, I think one of the few things that the foundation does own is the OpenStack brand, and if we don't start putting some mechanism around how it gets used and where it can and can't be used, then it will continue to lose value. So I tend to agree. I think the program's mechanism for doing that is clearer, at least in the way we talked about it, than in the other elements that have been coming out there. So I do think it's an important topic that the board needs to stay on to. I don't think we can just drop it.
So I don't want to. We've gone more than 20 on this, and I hate to be timekeeper, but it's helpful. That we have consensus in DefCore that this is an important topic. I think the next thing we need to do is it needs to get on the board agenda, and I think before that we need to talk to the TC in a joint meeting and work this, and at least find out if the TC is going to have an allergic reaction or a supportive reaction, and find out what the allergies are to, if there are any.
Yeah, well, another aspect of it is if we, because I think that, Josh, you make a lot of really good points there, and I still think that perhaps there's some way to actually get these requirements, the output of these results, even earlier into the process. Because I think that if you look at the graduation requirements and everything that the TC has been putting together, I think they do care about the functionality and how well it works, but they haven't taken the time to kind of build up a set of inputs that are the same kind of thing that we're talking about here. And so, I think that it actually would be really great if this was something that became part of the incubation process, was actually like starting to develop tests along these lines. And because I think that the practical reality is that if something ends up in the integrated release, in a lot of people's minds, whether it can use the term or not, they're going to see it as part of OpenStack. And so, doing what we can to make sure that the things that end up in the integrated release are more fully baked and tested and have at least some kind of output around how experimental they are would actually, I think, benefit the process as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. I still think the separation from projects to programs was really useful, but the equation of a one-to-one relationship between program and project broke all of the usefulness of that separation. And that's, I think, what we're trying to get back from, is to say we need to have fewer programs. They need to be tightly managed. They need to represent really a very fundamental blessing by OpenStack that the things in this program are what we believe OpenStack is and should be in the future. And but I think you're right. I think, and Rob, to respect your role as timekeeper, if the right next step is for us to go and have a joint session with the TC on this topic, then let's go do that at the earliest opportunity. But the last 6 times we have proposed a joint session with the TC, they have not made the time for it. We've never had a joint board and TC session. And it was written into the bylaws that we were supposed to do that on this particular topic. So the reason I'm just saying, hey, let's move forward, the TC doesn't bloody well care, is because we've never been able to get a joint meeting on it. And I don't know if that's a failure of the board to communicate to the chair and the TC that it's important, or a failure of the bylaws to actually enforce it by, maybe firing everybody on the TC if they can't make time to meet with the board, or something. Like, it's been years. It's so frustrating.
I think that they'll be receptive if there's a single topic meeting that for this, and they understand it's. I mean, they definitely make time when they feel like the board is doing something they don't agree with, right? That we saw that with the spider stuff. I got plenty of direct TC interaction based on spider, and we had a lot of discussions, and it improved things. So let's try that, but I think it needs to be on the board agenda. This topic ends up having to be probably on the face-to-face that we're doing in March.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
February.
Yeah, it's February. I think it's February. Yeah, but I think I agree. We've got to have this on the board agenda and face-to-face, and have the open, the dialogue and discussion about it.
Okay. I think that'll motivate the discussion.
Okay.
All right. Good. All right. So I'm going to close this topic with that as an action item.
Cool.
And so next, great discussion. I sorry to limit it on time, but.
And I'm sorry to yell so much.
That
wasn't very much yelling from you, Josh.
That's true. That was a relatively modest amount of yelling.
And I think it established. I mean, I don't know if people saw this, but in the Join Me chat, Randy was giving you a high five and a +1. So.
I didn't see it.
So this was we accomplished the objective. It just took a little bit longer, which is it's. I'm not hearing any dissent that this is a topic for the DefCore to keep after, and that was the checkpoint that I wanted.
Okay.
From a committee perspective, and because we have to manage our business. All right. RefStack use cases.
We have a doc.
This is cool. My goal is not to review this here. Oh, goodness. Josh, can you give me access?
I didn't give you access? I'm sorry, that was embarrassing. Hold on.
Not on my Rollingwood Citizen account. That's
public on the web, anyone can view. Sorry, that's fixed. And, oh, no, it's your, Hirschfeld is spelled wrong. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Let me fix that.
I don't use it for my email address very often.
Is there anywhere I can look at it too?
Yep, that URL should work for everyone now.
Okay, cool.
Woo! And Jonathan, I gave you edit.
I just clicked the wrong one.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
And so the goal here is I had review and approve, but we haven't circulated this enough to approve it. So what I'd like to do is talk for a minute about what this document's about, why we're doing it, and then and also why some of it's highlighted and some of it's not. So the ref stack is a major component of what we need to deliver in April, and the idea being that ref stack is a place where we're going to show the results of the tests and show which companies and clouds are passing, which products companies and in public and in private clouds are passing the must-pass tests, so that people can benchmark themselves and can benchmark the activities in the community against the must-pass tests, and ideally against all of the tests, because that's part of our filtering process is to collect feedback about what's going on. So RefStack is the public face of how all this stuff is going to go. And Joshua's been leading the charge and has been dedicating the resources into making this happen. However, one of the things we want to do is make sure that as development is going on, to allow people to come in and participate, we wanted to have an agreement on which use cases we thought were the most important and which ones we were driving. And Josh and I have not, which I think is very healthy, not agreed 100% on how this should go and what its objectives are. I've had a much more private cloud focus. Joshua's had a more public cloud and validation focus on it. And so we're
well, I just assume that my private cloud software is perfect and it's the public cloud that's broken. Sorry, that was me being an asshole.
No historical relevance in that. Yeah, okay. There's a tweet in there somewhere. I don't know. So the idea is we want to put the use cases out. This is David Linwell and I had sat down after a previous meeting and come up with this list, and it hasn't been vetted very widely. So this is sort of our first exposure with it. But what we did, independent of the persona work that's also going on, we created some persona categories. So there's ops, users, prospect is somebody considering OpenStack, vendor, the foundation itself, because we think that there's a vested interest in that. And then there's another vendor who relies on the OpenStack APIs. And this is what we tried to do with the numbering is actually cross-link numbering. So if things seem out of order, it's because we kept adding at the bottom so that our numbering wouldn't get broken. And went through and tried to identify these items. It's a really fun discussion. We probably need almost a dedicated meeting to review these. But the idea was that we went through to find a minimal viable product set, and that's the highlighted in yellows, the things that we think we must have in April. There's a lot. We actually want all these things done for April, but the yellow ones seem like a required set. So the one that's
missing, Rob,
yep,
that we didn't talk about, and I know you and I had talked about it previously, and I talked to David about it, but we've never circled on, is using the RefStack scorecards to link directly to the API documentation at the right version.
Ooh.
And essentially to allow consumers of the APIs to go directly from the current scorecard for a particular service or software product to the official API docs for the way those APIs at that version will work.
Okay.
Because I mean, one of the things that yeah.
So we don't have enough time to really dig into what these are. What I would ask people to do as homework is to take a look at it. And I think we're actually going to need to have a meeting. So let me do this in Elephants.4. We actually have an agenda item to review.
Yeah. And just so everyone is clear, this is just basically the burn down list of what David will be working on implementing in RefStack in what order. Because we could build everything forever, but if we need to use this tool to complete the DefCore work, we're not going to have every feature we might want done. I do not have an infinite sized dev team.
I'm actually trying to coordinate work on the other side of this, which is a containerized version of Tempest that uploads the results to RefStack. So we're working on both sides of this. That doesn't really show up in these use cases, but there is an effort to try and make it so you can take Tempest in a container, Linux container, run it in a local environment, and then have it basically be self-contained and then upload the results to RefStack as a single pass, and we'll use that.
I think that's user 3.
Is it user 3?
I
think it might be. Yay, did we actually capture it? Thank you.
It's user 3 and vendor 4. Yeah. Yeah,
right. Well, there's the website of it, and then there's the actual implementation.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot of, and this is one of those places where we need help. So people who want to engage, having these effective use cases put up will make it easier for us to discuss features and developments and check-ins against the RefStack work.
Cool.
All right, so let me figure out what our action items are from that. Oh, review before next meeting.
Yeah, we're both typing that at the same time.
Oh, good. So, and then what we'll do is prioritize. We need to prioritize the features. So out of this review.
And of course, this is a duocracy, so anyone who thinks one of those features is more important than the rest of us, you are welcome to donate some developer resources to build that one first.
Well said.
Snarky, but reasonable.
Awesome. Okay.
All right.
Other comments or items before we move to the next and final item? All right. All right. Thank you. So I would caveat this very in the sense of that we're not looking to perfect the criteria right now. What we're trying to do, and let me pull up the page. What we're trying there's 13 criteria. If you haven't reviewed them, please take some time to review them. There were a couple of significant things that came out of the subcommittee for the criteria. One is that we made the decision that they would be weighted. So of the 13 criteria, some of them will be considered more important and some of them less important. We don't know what the weights should be yet. That would be one of the final things to emerge out of all this is the weighting, because what we felt was that we needed to actually score all of the tests against the criteria and then figure out the relative weights, because that will then influence what the cutoff level is. So we might find that there's tests in the margin that if the weight for criteria 6 was higher, all of them would become no-brainers, and so we're going to play with that.
So Rob, I'm confused about criteria because I only see 11 in the agreed upon and then 3 in non-consensus.
So of those 11, there's 4 is actually 3.
Oh,
3
gotcha.
criteria. So I'm sorry, it's confusing. I didn't want to renumber them yet, so we're going to weight I expect we're going to weight 4A, 4B, and 4C separately. So they're really 3 different criteria.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I see 4A as being probably more important than 4B, which is equally more important than 4C. Okay.
Right. But yet we want to score them. That's why it's 13.
Thanks. Sorry.
No worries. It's confusing, and I couldn't think of a better way to clarify, short of renumbering.
It's actually 13 then.
So the idea is that these criteria, the controversial criteria became consensus criteria once we agreed to weighting, because everybody's like, well, even if I don't believe in that criteria absolutely, I accept that it might have a portion of weight in there, and that made it easier to get consensus.
Right.
It might have just postponed the conversation, but it made it easier to get consensus. And then the idea is these criteria are not the final criteria. They are they're preliminary criteria that we're going to use to see if the whole process works. So I would actually ask us to exit this meeting with hey, yay, verily, these preliminary criteria are good enough that we can evaluate a subset of the 1,000-something tests against these criteria and start seeing if weight, basically a proof of concept for the whole process.
Can we reverse that? Can we invite anyone on this call who objects to such a hey verily to stand up and be stoned? Consensus by force of violence or the threat of violence. Okay, never mind. We could do that in a more friendly fashion. You're right.
So that's the thing that seemed to help with this is that we're going to find that I suspect 2 or 3 of these criteria are not useful, and that 2 or 3 things we missed 2 or 3 things, and it lowers everybody's blood pressure if they realize that that's the expectation.
Right. Okay.
So.
Anyone want to comment further on the draft criteria, numbers 1 through 11 plus 4B and 4C, for a total of 13? I would like to propose that 11B should be added, which is if it weighs more than a duck, it is a witch.
How about if it floats?
I hate to say this, but for those of us who are only on the Etherpad, we can't really join in the fun. At least I don't see the amazing criteria here.
It's another Etherpad. Sorry, we'll add the link again. It's linked inside this Etherpad. Actually, it's right there. Yeah. Oh, now there's 2 copies of the link.
I just did it again. That's cool.
Is that the test pad, the test criteria?
DefCore test criteria. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not a perfectly well-organized document, since the agreed-upon criteria is roughly at the top, but not after the other bits. So.
Yeah, and I have a shorter blog post that has the criteria in a cleaner format. I'll link that too.
I think 12B should be added to honor the fact that Python is named after MinTPython and OpenStack is written in Python partly because of its humorous references. But. All right.
Is that true?
So,
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, learn something new.
I will forward you the official copy of the trade study we did at NASA to select Python as the language in which we would develop. Anyway, it has only one Monty Python reference in it.
Interesting. Okay.
Huh.
I'd like to recommend that numbers be changed to Roman numerals, just, because I think that would be more confusing, and it would be consistent with our heritage.
Yea, verily, we will renumber.
All right, so we will renumber the tests to reflect the number.
I think the use of Arabic numbers actually indicates a tendency towards terrorism, and would be. I'm sure the NSA is quite concerned about the clear drift towards terrorist infrastructure.
Yea, verily, we will eat freedom fries and renumber the tests.
Can we switch it to hex or binary?
No.
Ooh, that's actually a good idea.
Has to be Roman.
Mm-hmm.
Although really, it's not really interesting until you get up towards 1,000, and when it's really difficult to figure out what the hell it is.
Okay, so we have some decisions on this to work with. I'm really pleased with the way that the committee worked out. I think that the criteria are meaningful so far. So we'll see as we test it.
I'm sorry, just on a serious vein, has this list been opened up to the public? I mean, do we know if has it been commented upon by?
It was referenced in Rob's DefCore update.
But referenced in a way where people could get access to it, or?
It was also,
so.
Yeah, and the other thing I did was I sent it to the TC and the board as part of a wrap-up after this meeting, and actually didn't generate any discussion. It was over New Year's, and so I'd like, we should resend it. But frankly, I think the criteria are pretty much a consensus list.
Well, I just, I think it's important to get it out there, and maybe, unfortunately, maybe you need a little bit more, publicity so people understand that it exists.
And this is actually part of the plan we have going with Lauren to promote this. So we will definitely do that. I think that the pedal's really going to hit the metal. I don't think that's the right analogy. When we start in the immediate next step, which is we start actually taking tests and applying the criteria, and then people are going to start looking through capabilities that they think are important and seeing whether or not they score it. One of the things that we decided was we were going to have a maximum weight of 100, total weight of 100. So we should be able to, they won't be stack ranked, but they'll be, because ties will be okay, but we'll rank tests between 1 and 0 and 100. And I think that action will attract attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I anticipate. Until then, people are gonna we're being busy and active, and nothing we've done yet is going to make anybody's baby not be included on the varsity team. That analogy works.
That sort of worked. That was impressively convoluted.
It was almost a sports analogy. Oh, gotta go back. I gotta get a new book of sports analogy. All right. So,
awesome.
So for next, what I would suggest is we've been on a 2-week cadence for these meetings. Stay on it. Since we have consensus on this, I want to review the next steps we've got. But the cadence of the meeting is going to determine that. Is 2-week cadence the right cadence? So go back to.
What's the end date? I mean, when do we have to have all this completed?
March, early March.
Rob, what I'm going to suggest we do instead is and I think it's a little dangerous. I think we should book a no more than X later from now meeting, but I think we're really going to be, we should meet when we have things we can review. You know, so we're going to say, okay, well, we need to build a couple more features into RefStack so we can run a bunch of scorecards. We need to meet when Troy Toman has done a first pass on identifying capabilities based on the test lists. So I think I would suggest for the next 2 weeks, let's get really active on the mailing list and just try and post an update every couple of days on where we're at with these various activities. But I think the next major piece of work is to do a first pass on applying criteria to test the criteria. And I think we have 2 actions to finish before we can do that. One is the capabilities identification. The other is some of this RefStack work.
I think there's a third thing, which is to actually take the criteria and start evaluating them against the tests. So,
right.
Right. So, how many tests are a valid subset? Let's discuss what we want this subset to look like. Right. So that's a decision.
Well, let's say 12 capabilities is a minimum. Does that make sense?
Across multiple projects, or?
Yes, across multiple projects. We need to have a look at some capabilities that should obviously be in, some that should obviously be out, some that everyone feels are on the edge or debatable, and see if the criteria produces results that make sense or feel defensible, or both.
So one of the things I would ask is that I'm happy to take a first pass and do like 20 tests just to get this process right. I would love to have everybody in the DefCore committee pick a body of tests and try to score them. Because that way, 1, you're going to learn what the criteria are and figure out if they make sense and be able to have an opinion. And then 2, it would subdivide the work. So can we have an action that the DefCore committee members will will actually go and do the scoring?
Yep. I'm also going to try making a Google spreadsheet for applying that scoring. It's a little insane, but it might work.
Cool.
Which basically has the column of tests, the column of criteria, and the test being considered.
I was going to take on the same task. So if you want to do it first, but can we do it in that spreadsheet we've already got?
I don't think so, unfortunately.
All right, I'll send that a link. Because the capabilities summaries were going to go into that spreadsheet too. So.
Really?
Mhm. That's
okay.
what Troy said.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we need to. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So everybody's gonna get homework. The only reason I would schedule another meeting would be to have a deadline. Because I think we need to have the capabilities, the first pass screening, all need to be in the next 2 weeks if we're going to stay on schedule. And so It's nice to have a report out, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know when this meeting is, but we will discuss the results of the initial criteria scoring. And then we will also review capabilities.
Mm-hmm. So there may be a couple of these, like criteria 6 should reflect future technical direction. It's going to be hard for us to score that. I mean, it may be that Monty, and we can rely on Monty and Nicholas Barcet and other folks that are on both the TC, Mark McLaughlin, sorry, that are on both the TC and the board to help. But most of us would be stretching to feel like we understand what future technical direction from the TC should look like.
When are we planning on? When are we planning on having the meeting with the TC? When do we think we can do that?
The first year that they're willing to.
So working backwards.
Yeah,
working backwards from the face-to-face in early February, I think what we're looking at is probably in the middle, so 2 weeks from now, would be my guess. We might be able to make the agenda of our next meeting this topic and just invite them to the first part.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my expectation, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, how much time? I mean, I just want to make sure it's a productive meeting, and are we in a position now to start feeding them stuff? Because I think we need to do two things. I think we need to, make sure they're prepared to talk about it, or at least give them the opportunity. And number two is tell them what we expect of them.
So yeah, I guess I'm not going to ask Jonathan to take on the write-up that I had promised to do. Let me put together the short statement that I was.
Yeah, I mean, even if we've got to do it sequentially, if it's really 2 weeks away, I think we need to start feeding them stuff now, or else I think they'll have a legitimate beef that we're not, that they're not prepared.
No, this is me not doing I was supposed to ping Stefano, and Joshua and I can take on that.
No, I'm sorry, you can't take responsibility for it. It's Josh's fault. Today it's Josh's fault. Everything's Josh's fault. So
I'm totally okay with that.
Yep.
I'm absolutely okay with that.
Now, next time, Rob, it's your fault, but everything's your fault. But you guys, that's what happens when you're committee chairs, co-chairs. You share responsibility.
Sure. That's good.
Just don't always get punched.
50 shot.
Rob, it's not your day today.
Yeah.
Today's my day to be wrong.
That's right. And for example, Josh was wrong when he numbered the criteria in Arabic scripts. Yeah.
Oh, that's very true.
So on that note, I think we've got a good set of action items and an agenda for our next meeting. We're at 90 minutes. I would move to adjourn.
I will second your motion.
All right. Everybody, thank you for participating. Watch out since we haven't scheduled the next meeting, watch out for emails. We'll get it scheduled.
I'm sorry, one serious question before we sign off. Is noon work for people? Because, it is a time when people sometimes have meetings and stuff like that. So I would like to just make sure that noon continues to work for people.
It's a set of time zones we're trying to cover.
Okay, well, that's fine. Okay.
So I think the next meeting might end up being morning because I think from a TC community perspective, mornings are better. But
I got to jump on another call. Thank you very much, Rob, and everyone else.
Thanks a lot.
We'll work it out.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.